we had like a $15,000 bottle of wine. Now I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between a 50 or a 15,000.
If you buy it when it's young, it's more plentiful and you probably pay a less cost.
What's interesting, I could drink a half a bottle of scotch, a half a bottle of tequila, and you'd think I'm fine, right?
It's all a blur whether you drink it or you spit it out. So that's one hint I would say for the person who loves wine or is getting into it.
Do you know what the most expensive bottle of wine is as far as cost? Or
some of the most expensive wines could be wines like.
Okay, so Austin, welcome to the Power of Influence. Super excited to have this conversation, and I know you're in the Niagara region, and from your background here, the first thing I got to ask you is, what is this? I can't even really pronounce it, and I don't drink a lot of wine, but I know it's a huge industry, and I mean the wine connoisseurs out there. I mean, they're smelling it and swirling it and everything else. And so from my standpoint, not really understanding that industry and the terminology, could we kind of kick off and just give me a little bit more about your background and what this, how do you pronounce it? Sommelier. I know when we were first talking earlier, kind of preparing for this, and I was like, are you from Somalia or something? And that's what that's what I was hearing. But anyway, sommelier. So, tell us about that as well, and what led you to what you're doing today, because it's a fascinating career.
Sure. So it's funny because that's kind of where people gravitate to. I got a lot of friends from Africa. I got a lot of friends in Ethiopia and Eritrea, and places like Sudan, Somalia, Egypt. So that's where they think when they hear the word, because it sounds kind of familiar. But a sommelier is a person whose main tool is a corkscrew, and their other tools are things like glassware. And then we've got all these great products behind us. So sommeliers are people who are professionals in wine, but we don't just study, what's in the glass when we take one of these great products. These are all brands I work with behind me, and pour it in the glass, and we serve it to you and pair it with food. But it's also the soil, the climate. Niagara is an area with some of the most diverse and unique soils on the planet. And we've also got Lake Ontario to our north, Lake Erie to our south, the Niagara River, which is our border between Ontario and New York State, Canada and US. So we know about where grapes are grown, what conditions they're impacted by. We get a lot of frost and cold temperatures. We get hotter than Napa on certain years, but then we get the really cold winters. So it's about growing the right grape in the right place, and then how we produce the wine. So I'm not a winemaker. I've got scientists and winemakers that are, world renowned on my team. They make the stuff. My other buddies grow the stuff. And then when it comes time to saying, which bottle do we put it in? What label? Do we want it to be shiny like the Alborga Fiore di Vigna? Or do we want it to be kind of funky like the Frankie Two Squirrels? Or we've got a really high-end wine like Fred Reserve Bolero. That wine's really expensive and it's really rare. So, it's the marketing decisions. It's also about how we pair it with food. So sommelier is a kind of mystical word. Wine's intimidating. It's been very clandestine for a long time. My name and my email is Niagara Snob. I'm not pretentious, and I always kind of went into it like that. So I got into it young. I was sometimes the youngest, poorest guy in the room. And I remember being in the back of the room at, a tasting with experts, whether I was maybe setting up or participating, and being very intimidated. And now 20 years later, I've worked for some of the biggest and the best brands in Canada. I've got international contacts. And now it's about me and you sitting down, having a nice meal, drinking wine, and it's really lots of fun. So that's kind of my long answer. And I got into it by accident. Did not intend to even work in this industry initially.
Okay, cool. You say friend, snob or whatever, and I immediately thought of Frasier, right? Did you ever watch Frasier?
Oh, Frasier and all the antics. He's my typical. Frasier and Niles are like, if I had to get a stereotypical client. Those are guys that got high net worth and they like the good shit, and it's really hilarious. But I know there's a couple. Maybe you could reference a scene or two. But I know I used to watch it when I was younger.
Well, the wine is like almost integrated into a little bit almost in most episodes that they have, but the one where they were both competing for I don't know if it was the word that you were saying Somalian, or if it was I think they were called the Cork Master, and they were both competing with that and doing doing a taste off and swirling it and smelling it, and then they swish it around in their mouth and stuff. So what is there really actually something to that? What are we doing when we're smelling it, and then I pick up a little bit. They're looking for these fingers that are, after they swirl it, running down, and the full body, and they're supposed to identify what region it came from, and what's the grape, or the all the different flavors that come out of it. I mean, honestly, I I'd be a lot better at identifying Scotch, okay, finer Scotch, but from a wine standpoint, uh, it doesn't really. I mean, I can't really tell the difference, to be honest with you. But tell me a little bit. What are they actually looking for, and can they truly identify all those things from a little sip and swirling and smelling and swishing?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And it's a kind of good foundational conversation to have because before we get deep into why this wine pairs with this food and how the wine's made, there's simple things like what's the environment the wine is served in. So I brought a couple things here. Like this is some really fine ancient crystal, and I might serve you, maybe not a scotch, but I could give you a little aperitif or a digestif to kind of wet the whistle before a meal, or we had a big meal, want to have like a nice Amar or a Digestivo to settle the tummy. This one, you're going to have an ounce or two. You might serve it on its own or with a little piece of ice or a lemon peel, but it's fancy and it's less about jumping out of the glass because those are often strong. They're infused with things like herbs or flowers or other things. But, you know, this is the original style of Marie Antoinette, actually modeled, they say, after her breast shape. And that is an old fashioned glass. But if you look at a new champagne flute, it's going to be,
What kind of what cup size would that be exactly?
it depends on the zoom on the lens there. So, yeah. This kind of glass is real old fashioned. Now, you haven't seen this used in a restaurant since the 40s or the 70s. And most people, you have the tall flute and there's a laser etched point on the bottom of the glass, the nucleation point. This is really scientific. It's where a gas comes from a dissolved state as liquid and actually comes out in a bubble. They'll laser etch the bottom of that flute. So a really fancy wine in a high-end restaurant, you'll see like the tall, narrow glass with that one point, and it'll preserve the bubble. Whereas now you get even places serving a lot of things like a paper plane in this glass, or we've had our high-end restaurant in Toronto. I worked there for 7 years called Sassafras. It's like super ritzy right at Bay Station. And we actually, when we did our 20th anniversary reimagination, I did the beverage consulting, and we went back to an old flute like this. Some people loved it, some people hated it. Now, we go into the big boys. Like I got big bottle of California wine, or I got the Fred Reserve. This is a wine that my friend Fred DeProfio makes. Kind of a cult wine. There's no actual winery. You can't really get it unless you got the handshake or somebody. We put that in a big glass like this. Now that's going to give more surface area. You said the fingers, it's actually more the legs. And those will drip down the glass, and that can talk about sugar density. It can talk about alcohol content. So you might see a lot of those legs forming, and then you'd say, smell it, taste it. Is this wine sweet or dry? If there's no sugar, we're probably talking more booze. If it's got some sweetness, it could be like even an Amarone or an Appassimento style where they dry the grapes out by naturally air drying or kiln, concentrates it. That's when the booze gets up 14, 15, 17% alcohol. So if this is a good example, I like bringing it away from wine and back to more relatable. Like I'll pour myself a little sip here of something that's not wine, right? I'm gonna do a cranberry blueberry acai. It's a local Ontario product. This is organic juice with Piemonte vodka. It's called Crafty Elk. I'm just putting this in a glass. Sorry, I don't have one for you there. I'll send you some. And that for me, I'm not going to get hung up on what the glassware is. But if we go to say watch Pavarotti sing, or you see Marshmello do EDM, or you get Adele or Taylor Swift or some performer, and nobody changes the mic check, nobody adjusts the speakers, you're going to see the exact same artist and you're going to hear them in a different way. Well, the same bottle of wine, if we put it in a different glassware, totally changes it. So there's so much science behind that program, and it might sound complicated as I ramble on, but the other two tools I didn't talk about are a notepad and a pen. You see all us maybe pretentious wine snob people swirling and sniffing, and we'll talk about why we do that, but we also are very good at taking notes, and it can be overwhelming. I might go into a government quality control tasting and have 30 to 150 products in front of me, and I just take a little sip and I'm just saying yes or no. Or I might go to a trade show. I've got 4 next week that are all, government tastings for Portugal, Greece, Italy. We might taste a few dozen to 150 wines in one foul swoop. We're just smelling and taking a sip and dropping it out. But if we don't take photos of the bottles and we don't write down some notes, it's all a blur whether you drink it or you spit it out. So that's one hint I would say for the person who loves wine or is getting into it. Take photos of the bottles. You need to know exactly the year, write down notes, then you can look back. And that's the easiest way to keep track. And that's when I tried to learn about wine. I'd go out, I'd try 20 different Sauvignon Blanc or Riesling in a row until I was sick of it. And I'd say, how come I'm always tasting lemon or grass? Or why do I taste cherry when I get a Merlot? Now, those are the call signs in my brain that I can lock in. When I smell it in a blind tasting, then we can pull it out of our memory bank. So this wine thing, it sounds really complicated, but it's actually more low level, and sometimes people make it to be a little bit more snooty than it needs to be. But no, there's all kinds of technical stuff there.
It's interesting because, I mentioned Scotch, right? And, Scotch is, I've really gotten also into good tequilas, right? I've gotten into good tequilas, Scotch, but what's interesting, I could drink a half a bottle of Scotch, a half a bottle of tequila, and you'd think I'm fine, right? I mean, I drink one glass of wine and I am like flying. Why is that such a, because the alcohol content you'd think would be a lot more in the Scotch, especially drinking that large amount, where I drink one glass of wine and I just like almost feel, drunk.
It's not just the alcohol content. When people drink a lot, what's the sugar content of the product? And it's not like Scotch is totally dry, but you know, this product I'm having, it's not very high alcohol. What are we ranking in here? It's 4.5%. So it's not strong, but there's some sugar content from the natural juices. So it's not a sweet product, but if I had lots of vodka and soda with a little bit of lime in it, it's clean, it's diluted by water, and there's not a lot of sugar. I find when people have a lot of like really, really strong mixed drinks, like cocktails out at the bar, the sugar content can actually be a big problem too. Now, in wine, we have high levels of acidity. The pH can be quite low. We do things like age it in oak. That might give aroma and flavor that you like, or it might give attributes that you don't like. There are even things like sulfites that are in wines as a preservative and a stabilizer. We use them when treating the raw juice and in the process to kind of keep down other cultures other than the good yeast from growing. And then we use it when we have a shelf stable product. I've got wine I made from my friend Phil Wiley's farm this past season. It's the first time I actually tried making wine. I've been working with it for 20 years, but I did a stint at a wine production facility. And it's interesting when we're treating the juice, we're measuring stuff and we're adjusting it. But some of the wine I made that's more like low intervention or hands off natural wine, those wines are not meant to be aged a long time. They might be a bit more funky. They're not as clean. I didn't filter them. I didn't adjust them. But there's sulfites that's more predominant in white wines than reds. And there's also things like histamines, like taking an antihistamine pill when you're kind of congested or something. There can be histamine levels in different wines, especially in reds. So there's all kinds of stuff going on in a wine, and in the grape, it's very complex. And a lot of the DNA of the grape is not just the juice and the seed, but the skin and the phenols. Grapes, like cannabis, have millions of different genetic varieties, and they really work well or poorly depending on the condition. So the infinite number of flavors and aromas in those two agricultural products is kind of crazy. But I get it, because there's people that don't drink a lot of wine and they have a couple glasses and they're looped, and then there's other people like, you say you drink a lot of scotch and it doesn't hit you. So it all depends on conditioning. Another thing I should say, it's related to the effect in terms of intoxication, but your palate changes weekly, monthly. These wines, if you buy this wine and you don't open it for a year or two, this wine's alive. It could be getting better, it could be getting worse. So, if you like the way a wine is drinking, drink it now. If you think it tastes good, but it's a little coarse and dry and it's kind of, wow, it smells good, it tastes good, but it's really aggressive, maybe put it in the cellar. And then we got to talk about the temperature, the humidity. Those are all insurance factors. But if you have a wine that's tasting perfect and you like it today, buy a case of it, put it in your cellar, open it when friends come over, because it's going to evolve. I've had wines I drank too young and I regret, and I should have had them for later. And there's other wines I got that are 10, 20, 50 years old in my cellar, and some of them are more sentimental and other ones are getting better. So that's kind of a whole other dimension too.
Yeah. So when you talk about that, because we talk about a person like they're aging like a fine wine, right? It's supposed to get better with age, and so I was actually in the Bahamas, and there was a place called Gray Cliffs. Are you familiar with that?
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, this supposedly is like the largest wine collection in the world. And, it's, they actually brought us down. It's like an old house converted into a restaurant, but it has all these tunnels and stuff because they used to, I guess, back in the day, like smuggle people or something through that. And so it's this massive wine cellar. And then down in the basement, there's also this like boardroom, like you picture like a mafia scene, right? And so I was, with this company, and it was kind of like a rewards trip, right? And so I don't know, it was like 8 or 10 of us, and so we had like a $15,000 bottle of wine. Now I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between a 50 or a 15,000, but apparently there are wines in this cellar, right, that are like in the hundreds of thousands. I can't remember what the number was, but do you know what the most expensive bottle of wine is as far as cost or?
Some of the most expensive wines could be wines like Madeira. Madeira are the islands, off Portuguese coast there. And those are wines owned by people like Thomas Jefferson. And some of those wines can age and be hundreds of years old. And they're actually made in an oxidized style where they put a barrel on a boat. And by accident, they went around circumnavigated and they taste this stuff and they go, shit, this tastes better than it did a year ago. So now they're imparting flavor, like scotches are old and aged. The older the scotch, the more expensive it often is. Or we could look at scarcity. Like if there's only 10 of these corkscrews in the world, now this is not expensive. If there's only 10 of these, they're made of 24 karat gold and they got diamonds in them, and some celebrity signed them. I can charge whatever I want for this product. So wine is like the best marketing. You're a big business guy, right? Wine's like the best marketing thing in the world, next to maybe diamonds themselves, because they're not easily attainable. People can do things like make a limited number or put them in a certain oak barrel. So wines like Madeira, or wines like Bordeaux or Burgundy, wines from parts of Italy, these are very rare. And then wines like California. California is the number one cult region where you've got stuff. Where you got to be on wait lists, like Rasta's buddy Mark. He's got all kinds of wine in the cellar. I've talked to him 10, 15 years ago in Toronto on the phone, and he's naming off wines like Screaming Eagle, and these are like, you got to be on a wait list for years to even get an email to say you might be able to buy 3 bottles, and that's it. So when you have limited availability, you can charge whatever you want. Now, does it mean the 15,000 bottle you guys drank at dinner is better than something here? Not necessarily, but you got notoriety, you have awards, you have accolades, and it doesn't mean that the production cost is any more. Like, what's it cost to make the E-Class or S-Class Mercedes? And what's it cost to make the Maybach? Well, it's got a lot of the same engine, a lot of the same speakers, but it's got teak wood and it's got different leather and it's limited. So it's really cool to kind of look at that and, as a consumer, navigate it. Like, I want the cheapest price on the most unknown wine. I want to get all of it before you know about it. I want to put it in my cellar and I want to drink it later. But that's me as a consumer. If I'm a marketer and you got a winery, I want to sell that wine for the highest price point. I want to put the most beautiful, sexy label on it. I want to tell this great story. So, there's people going about the industry. I got a friend in St. Catharines. He's the eighth generation grape grower. He's in his late 30s. His name's Phil Wiley. His family came up here from Pennsylvania area in the 1780s, and they've been growing grapes in St. Catharines since the 1850s. It's older than most in California. They're doing things in a very methodical approach. They're looking at 10 to 30-year averages. They're planting grapes that will be sustainable. I've also worked for Toronto billionaires that have dozens of companies, tons of financial backing, and they come into the game. They'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars doing research on the soil, on the site. They'll spend tens of millions on the facility. That's before they even make a single drop of wine. Some wineries never put their wine in competition. I've worked for some of the best in Canada that don't compete ever, because if they're not number one, they don't want to be number two or number three. Then I've worked for other wineries. We make 50, 60 bottles a year, different items. We put every single one in every single contest every single month. That costs a lot of money. But if you get notoriety and you win, now you get, magazine write-ups, you get accolades. So it's super cool to kind of think about that way. These are also kind of, more confidential discussions we're showing the public, and these are conversations I'm confident having, but a lot of people won't tell you that kind of story. So that's kind of my passion too, is giving you the uncensored access to what really goes on.
Well, you can really tell that you are like passionate about this, to be able to just, I mean, all the detail and the complexity of wine and just listening to you, it's very, very fascinating. But one of the things you mentioned, you like compared when we were talking about price, right? And you held up that corkscrew and, it's a couple dollars, but if it's rare, if there's not a lot of them made and you make a big deal out of it, all of a sudden what is it worth? Well, it's, worth what somebody will pay for it, right? That's really what the value comes from. But, because when you age, apparently they get better and better. So there's a lot to do. I hear about the storage where you have to, sunlight and storage and temperature, and you have to rotate the bottles and all that. But yet somebody could buy a $15,000 bottle of wine, like we had mentioned, and they let you taste it first, right? Because it can turn and become like varnish or vinegar or whatever. Does that happen very often? And so, let's say a restaurant has this, this wine that's $15,000 or $100,000 or whatever it is, crazy prices, right? And all of a sudden they drink it and it's not good. Then the client doesn't have to pay for that, but that's got to be, a huge loss. And I mean, is something like that even sometimes contested where, they come, oh, this is bad, I don't want it. Well, they pop the cork on a crazy expensive wine. And is there any liability? I mean, I've asked multiple questions here, but maybe if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a great topic of conversation. It's funny, I walk into a cocktail lounge that just opened in St. Catharines last night, and I got a client who has a tasting bar. It's called Series Tasting Bar. They only pour Ontario wine. It's really eclectic. Chef Kevin Kelly does like amazing tapas. So I actually left this bottle of wine and this big boy of sparkling at the tasting bar. And then I was walking into the next place, kind of like, who is this guy rolling into a cocktail bar? And I had two other bottles. So everybody stops and they're looking at me. Well, don't I meet two guys at the bar? One gentleman's from the Windsor, Ontario area, just across the river from Detroit, and the other guy's in the Kitchener area, but he's from like Minneapolis, right? So they had just dined at the top rated restaurant in Canada. I won't name drop, but it's easy to figure it out if you follow the Michelin guide. And this is the top, I think one of the top three restaurants rated in North America. They had just dined there for a 10-course tasting menu. It was like a 5-hour or a 3.5-hour experience, 10 courses. They told me they had just purchased, unrelated to that dinner, 2 bottles of wine, Lafitte Rothschild, I believe they paid around $1,700 a bottle per bottle. They bought one each. Now, they bought the wine with the intention of saving it and reselling it later. Then they got into the sauce and they said, "Oh, let's open one of them tonight." They didn't do that, but they told me the story. Now, these guys obviously have dough. The one was a retired CFO, the other guy's a big investment banker. And basically, they're the kind of clients that you want that aren't worried about the price. They're excited by a more expensive product. And that's like the dream opportunity when you're a winery or restaurant. Now, when they bought those wines, they have to make sure they're stored at the right temperature, which could be 15 degrees Celsius or 55 Fahrenheit. You want a lot of humidity. You want the orientation of the bottle instead of upright like this. You want the wine on its side. But this guy's got a screw cap. This doesn't matter about orientation. So a screw cap wine, that's a wine for drinking now. It's cheap and cheerful. It's sold at 15 bucks Canadian, and it's a great little house wine. Whereas a guy like this one even has a cork that's adorned in wax. Now, that's a little bit more for cosmetics, but this guy has to be on its side, and you'd want that laying down for anywhere between maybe 5 to 15 years. Now, you want to check in on that wine. So when people buy wine, they should be buying it in a minimum of 3 bottles, if not case or multi cases. And you want to come back every 6 or 12 months and pull a bottle. Now, if you have a wine that's $1,000 a bottle, you're a pretty lucky guy if you can go check up on that and guzzle one down every year or two. But as an insurance policy, you want to kind of check in on this product because there's nothing worse than buying an expensive case of wine. And 10 years goes by and you open one and you go, that wasn't as good as it was last time. Now, there's things called bottle variation. Some work, some don't. Some have a cork failure. Some could have had an issue when it went into the bottle. So, if you have a case of wine, you pull one, you don't like it, then you wait and you open another one, it's great. Maybe you just encountered one bottle that was off. There was a time where 1 in 10 corks were off. That's a lot of wine. That's a lot of negative impact for a consumer. But we've got different production methods. We've even got corks that have semi-synthetic. Half of this cork is a synthetic conglomerate, and there is a multi-million-dollar insurance rider policy that if you have even one wine oxidized, you're backed by that manufacturer. Now, the customer wants the natural cork, but the cork comes off a tree and the bark can have bugs in it, or we got to sterilize it and the sterilizer can taint the wine. There's all kinds of stuff. So you use this to protect yourself, but it doesn't look as fancy. I give you a wine that's 15,000 bucks and this comes out of it. You're like, what the heck's going on, man? So there's that balance. Now, I specialize in things other than wine, like contract negotiation and litigation stuff. Doesn't really happen over a bottle of wine. It's other, business interests, but you could have a contract here and this could actually be presented to the table. You come in with some celeb guys, and you open a nice bottle of wine at this awesome spot in Toronto. And I might put it in front of you and say, "Hi, Mr. Haremza, can you please just sign off on this? We bought this wine at auction. We can't guarantee where it was stored, and you're a VIP. We want to make sure you're happy. So if this isn't good, we'll get another wine out to the table. But this is the only one in our cellar. I'm charging you 20 grand. I'm charging you 50 grand. If it's not good, I can't have that on my profit and loss." So, a lot of people that have 7, 8, 10 digit bank accounts, they're not too worried about a bottle of wine, right? That could be like pocket change. That could be like for a guy like me getting a coffee. So, that's an unusual situation, but it could happen. And, you know, uh, maybe one day I'll be signing off on one of those when we get a little bit in the future, because I know you're all about supporting people and their growth. So you're very inspiring. But yeah, no, that's not a common situation, but definitely you could encounter that.
Hey guys, before we jump back into the episode, which I hope you're enjoying, this podcast is available literally everywhere. Just click the link down below and don't forget to subscribe. Yeah, you talk about a $50,000 bottle of wine, or I don't know how high it can actually go, but it's insane, right? And so the main cost comes from, yes, the rarity and the story, and but it's the age. I mean, you think about, I know Scotch is that way and stuff too. You buy something and you don't intend to sell it for 25 years. I mean, is that where a lot, I mean, is that, I mean, that's got to be a lot of the packed in cost is storing something for that many years before you sell it.
Sure. So, if you buy it when it's young, it's more plentiful and you probably pay a less cost. If you want to buy it for me at the winery 10, 15 years from now, you're going to pay a premium. I used to work at a place called Stratus Winery. You look it up, it's in Niagara on the Lake. They poured the wine for Obama, they poured the wine for the Queen of England. Not a lot of wineries can say that. They are fantastic since 25 years ago, storing old stuff and bringing it out and re-releasing it. They don't charge an exorbitant amount, but they still do a good job of holding it back, holding it back. And basically, what happens with those kind of situations is the customer gets access to something that they normally wouldn't get access to. Now, I've been a member at some of those kind of secret societies in Toronto. So basically, when you have those situations where a winery holds back old product, you have to be preventative. You have to be knowing you're going to do this. So if you're a winery that's not owned by some huge, investment firm or multi-billionaire, which there's dozens of wineries in Canada and around the world, but even in Ontario that are owned by extremely wealthy people that are skilled business people, and they're coming about this very differently. Then there's all kinds of mom and pop guys that are, they're farmers. And I think the story, like I brought Phil to meet David Puglisi. He's a third generation great guy. His father, Lou, has been a friend of mine for about 20 years. And that story was awesome. Rasta was like, we got to do a video with you and David, because that's a different story. But when you come into it as a business person, you might say, we got to clear out our stock each year. We have to get rid of this wine because at the end of the day, we need to make a profit and we can't have carrying costs of this just sitting around. So what will happen is the winery may say, let's look at our inventory and we don't want to carry over more than 10% of our stock each year. Now, there's wines that are delicious, but they're not meant to age. So you have to basically dump those off and get rid of them right away. There's other wines that may be beneficial to age. And if you have a wine that could easily age 10 or 20 years, why are you going to push through 90% of your volume? See, people are not always looking at this like a financial transaction and a long-term investment. Now, to hold the wine, it's going to be an inventory matter of staying at the winery, but we even have offsite third-party situations. You talked about some kind of mafia scene in a private room. 15 years ago, when I was a young guy, I was joining private societies of wine collectors in Toronto. You'd fingerprint scan to get in. You'd go in a hidden alley. You go underground in some office building, and there's like a palace of temperature controlled lockers. They're open 24 hours a day because there's no liquor license. We got really restrictive laws in Canada here for all kinds of stuff, but especially for alcohol. So we can't serve after 2 a.m. You typically can't serve at a liquor store after 6 p.m. It's really crazy. Like other parts of the world would scratch their head. But I would be in there, and you and me are going out and we're having a party in Toronto. It's like 2, 3 in the morning. Everything's closed. They go, "You still thirsty? You want some scotch? Let's go open a sparkling wine." We'll go to the cellar. We'll go in, and all of a sudden we got this like lock box. I open it up. I got all my wine in there. There's glassware. And at this point, there's no employees. We're just serve yourself. You either follow the rules and clean up, or you're not welcome. So it's really strict, but I would only keep a couple hundred bottles of wine. But I went to one in Etobicoke. My friend Jeremy manages Diamond Storage. They're in the West End of Toronto. He was showing me collections in there that could be worth $100K to $5 million. Like, I'm talking for just like 5 feet wide, 8 feet tall, not too much wine. We're not talking like a container of wine. We're talking like just a small amount. So there's guys I know in Toronto that I personally have served. I'll protect their identity, but they'll spend anywhere from $250,000 to $2 million Canadian on spec annually buying wine, because they're going to buy the good stuff. They're going to buy the rare stuff from Cali, from France, from Italy, and they're going to buy it knowing that, like a brick of gold, it likely has a very high duration in terms of carrying its value, if nothing else going up. So these guys will buy up all the best stuff. they'll fork out the dough, and then they'll come to you and me when we're begging for a couple bottles for a special dinner, and they'll say, "All right, man, I'll sell you whatever you want, but here's the price." And we're not going to like the price because now we got to pay the juice on the maturity. So it's really fun. I've got about 6 places in Toronto that I either frequent or I've had access to or still have access to. They're phenomenal, and there should be more stuff like that, where people can store their wine, but then even wineries store their wine there. So they're not storing it to resell it. But, I think that's one failure we've done in Ontario, and I'd like to see us do better in the future, is consciously hold back the good stuff. Hold back the good stuff, put it at Brock at the Covey. It's the number one wine school in Canada. They've got a new library there. Put it away and use it as a R&D thing for the industry, because California in the 70s started winning these big awards. The movie Bottle Shock and all the Judgment of Paris, where the Cali wines beat out the French. Right away, 50 years ago, these guys said, "Hey, we got to start saving this wine." So we need to start doing that in Niagara. It's not too late, but the best wines in Canada, for the most part, and this is controversial, come right within a 10 to 15 kilometer, 20-kilometer radius of where I'm sitting right now. And we need to really, as an industry, collectively, and as an individual producer, start taking the good stuff, put it away, document it so we can pull the corks later, talk about it. And then also, when we get that special client coming to the casinos in Niagara or seeing Niagara Falls or going to Toronto, pull out something, and really showcase it. We've got FIFA coming to Toronto in a few months. We're going to have millions of people with tons of money, but we don't have a lot of old wine to sell them. So that's kind of a business angle here.
Yeah, I mean, I think about stacking this wine year after year after year. I mean, there must be just massive, massive of these storage facilities, because you think about, they make a wine today that they're not going to release for 25 years, and then they make a wine next year that, I mean, the compounding effect of what is actually in storage is got to be incredible.
Yeah, I got a friend. His name's Warren Porter. His company in Toronto is called Iron Gate. This guy's the the shark of wine storage. Anybody who's a serious collector in Canada and probably North America knows him. He's storing the best wine. He's storing all the big guys' wine in secret facilities. He dropped a tow motor down an elevator shaft and then cemented it in with like a million cameras and security. So like all the rarest wine is there. It's insured. 15 years ago, 12 years ago, Warren's showing me technology that's like a little RFID tag. It's got multi-year battery life. He goes, "Austin, I'm going to throw this on a pallet of wine and put that pallet in the storage facility for 10 years. It's going to track GPS coordinates. It's going to track temp. It's going to track humidity. And now when I take this wine to auction, I'm going to demand 20% premium because I can prove to you, hey, John, you want to buy this stuff? I know where it was, when it was moved, what temp it was at." So, it's not even high technology stuff, but it's just being conscious, and it's super cool to kind of see people getting ahead of the curve with that.
Yeah, crazy. You mentioned an event. I know you've got the film festival coming up in Niagara.
Yeah, you know what? I got a couple events to talk about. So we'll start with Film Festival. That's going to be the first week or two of June. It's going to be in Niagara Falls. I'm working with Gordon So, who's the president, and Juvie and Rasta Phil. So we've got some awesome films debuting. We've got some local wine being poured. So it's going to be at the Greg Fruin Theater. It's the Niagara Film Fest, so you can check it online. We're just about to start talking about some kind of VIP stuff. So you can come to the festival. You can watch some really great films, try some local wine, but we'd love to have you or anybody who's attending. We've got some great ticketed VIP events. You can kind of get some one-on-one interaction with wine tastings, taste some exclusive brands, pair it with some food. Actually, on Monday, April 20th, we're wearing municipal, I see, and we're big in the golf community. You got Mark and Phil, and all of us are big into golf. I'm presenting on April 20th at the Ladies Golf Club of Toronto. It's the number one premier women's only private golf club. And I've got 50 private club managers coming to listen to me speak. So I'm educating them about wine, food, what products you should be putting on your list. You got high net worth individuals that are golfers, tennis players, yacht guys. I got the Royal Canadian Yacht Club coming. You got Big Win Golf Club, St. George's. These are like the who's who of golf in clubs in Canada. Boulevard Club. They're all coming in. I got the general managers listening to me speak. I'm working with Compass Group, which is an importer, and Rife Winery. Compass Group is one of the top international importers. They're owned by Klaus Rife in Niagara-on-the-Lake. We're going to feature their products, and I'm going to talk about my background because I work for the biggest in Canada, like Trius, which makes the wine for Peller and Wayne Gretzky. They cultivated me in 2007 by accident. I got a summer job and started sneaking upstairs and pouring all the good stuff. And my boss said, you're insubordinate. We can either fire you or we can pay for you to become a wine sommelier. What do you want to do? I said, I'll take the education. So a couple years later, I graduated, worked for a high-end chef named Mark Bocconi. He's like just world renowned, cooked at James Beard House in the 90s in New York. He's one of my mentors. So basically, I'm going to bestow my knowledge from some of the wineries like Stratus and Niagara-on-the-Lake and Tawes and Vineland. And then I worked for 7 years at a place called Sassafras. It's where I met a lot of celebs and heads of state. And I'm going to bestow some knowledge on these managers because high net worth people like golfers, they got money to spend. They've got multiple homes. They got boats. They travel. But you go to a golf club, and this is no dig because my parents are private club members. I love golf. They don't have the best glassware. They often, you go to a nice golf club and they're not going to give you a crystal glass like this. You know, they're not necessarily going to pour you like more exclusive wine. They also have food that sometimes is really top level and other times are mediocre. Same with presentation. And we also have, the ability to capitalize. You might get an average person, even if they're a multi-millionaire, going in and they spend $60 on lunch at a golf club and then they go off site and they spend $500 on dinner. So how do we kind of make it fun? You got young kids that do summer jobs. You got other people that are long in the tooth and they're not as passionate, but that's coming up. And then we also have the national fundraiser for KMH, which is the big mental health initiative foundation in Toronto. And we're doing an event called Untucked that'll be in September 21st. So all kinds of events. I'm working with Juvie and Rasta, and I'm really, really thankful to be a part of that group. Rasta and we met about 13 years ago through Mark Wahlberg's publicist, and Rasta's been a big mentor for me. So he actually came down with him and Ali on Wednesday. We were with Mayor Jim Diodati in Niagara Falls and the CEO of Niagara Parks. It was a big tourism summit with like 200 people. We made great contacts. We're really excited, and yeah, we'd love to have you down in Niagara whenever you get around this area.
Yeah, no, that sounds incredible. What's this Untucked? What type of an event is that?
So Untucked is going to be September 21st. It's going to be at Eagles Nest Golf Club. It's sponsored by Municipal. We got all kinds of celebrities there. Rasta Phil Entertainment's going to be a big promoter. Brand Voice with Jacob Kessler and Juvie, they're going to be coordinating this as well. So it's a huge fundraiser to help people with mental health struggles. It's based in Toronto, and this is one of the most elite golf courses in Canada. So you're going to have the who's who of the community there. I've got some great brands. We're just kind of tying up some deals to sponsor some stuff. I'm going to be giving away like high-end wine tastings and tourism packages. And then after the golf course tournament's done, we're going to do like some sommelier tastings and cool activations. So that's going to be awesome. That's a really important thing. So it goes to a good cause. And it's probably the biggest event that's coming down the pipeline. There are some other events too, but they're kind of top secret until Juvie and Jacob give us the green light. So I can tell you offline, I just can't talk about it here yet. So
Yeah, well, I'm guessing, with the field that you're in, that you definitely are like constantly preparing for events and tied into just incredible, high net worth people.
yeah, it's kind of cool. When I was a bit younger, I used to kind of get intimidated, and now I typically walk in a room like when I walked in with Ali and Rasta Phil in Niagara Falls. We just kind of have a level of confidence, and we don't really go in there as the wolves, but we go in there and people kind of gravitate towards us. We're very personable. So I've met all kinds of really important people, like Mr. Dana White, his company hired me in November, and his wife and kids and their parents and family friends flew in from Connecticut, and he couldn't make it because it was Game 7 of the World Series, and the Blue Jays didn't pull it off for us, but we pulled out all kinds of crazy old wines, and it was just like an awesome time. So, I mean, I've realized now that some of the bigger, more important people, they're super personable. They're just human beings. You got to treat them nice. Some of the people who are really irate and demanding clients typically are, the new money, and they're not really as passionate. So I find, making eye contact, shaking people's hands, reasoning with them. I also like to provide a real solutions based approach. There's been times where I've poured wine all over myself, I've spilt wine on people, things have happened. I've had to, intervene and rectify situations where even the person in charge of the whole company couldn't solve it. And I come up and go, "Hey, John, listen, sorry about that. Let's fix it." And I think people really appreciate just being down to earth, being direct. Doesn't have to be contrived. But with the casinos being here in Niagara and Toronto kind of being, it's the capital of Ontario, but it's not the federal capital. We're so close to Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York State. It's 5 hours to Montreal. We've got an airport in Toronto. We got an airport here in Niagara. We really need to be aggressively targeting those people. So that tourism summit we went to on Wednesday, it's really exciting. Some of the stuff coming down the pipeline in Niagara Falls. We're gonna give Vegas a run for its money. That might sound like a crazy statement, but with Stanley Cho, who's the Minister of Tourism, Culture, and Gaming, was our keynote speaker at the event. It's really exciting. The energy in that room was cool. So I think we got the wonder of the world right here, right at the international border. So we really want to take kind of that Vegas approach and say we're really behind in terms of the trajectory here. And now we got the best wines, we got all this stuff happening. It's time. So it's already exciting, but you give us a couple more years in Niagara, you won't even recognize this place. So it's going to do a lot for the wine industry.
Wow, fantastic. Well, this has truly been a very fascinating and enlightening, and just really enjoyed this conversation. And so we're running out of time here. And so maybe kind of to wrap this up, right? We've talked about the events and different things like that. But what would you want to say to someone that is um, that likes wine, that would like to better understand it? Because I mean, like you said, it's incredibly complex, and I imagine you never stop learning, right? But what would you say to someone, that is a wine drinker, wants to become what we would call more of that wine connoisseur? Really, where would you start?
I think the starting point is having an interest and an appetite. You don't have to start by buying expensive bottles. Going to a really nice wine bar, so go on Open Table, go on Google, figure out the better wineries that are within a close drive, figure out a couple good wine bars, because when you buy a bottle, you have to pay for the whole bottle and you have to drink the whole bottle. Wine only lasts for a day or a couple days if it's, older or more delicate. But you go to a tasting bar and you can pay them and say, "Can I give you a few bucks and you give me a sample of each of these wines?" I specialize in education. I've been passionate about wine for a long time. It took me about 3 years to go from knowing nothing about wine to being one of the youngest certified sommeliers in Canada. So it's not a huge uh, turnaround time. I've even got a PhD of education on my staff, and he's a business partner of mine. So we're really passionate about interacting with people. So we offer services like we'll come into your house, we'll do a seminar or a party, we'll come into your office, we'll do a little icebreaker, a thank you for clients. So those are really great things to do. I think that reading and learning is really important. If you want to learn about wine, get Hugh Johnson, The Story of Wine. It's all illustrations. It talks about not the technical stuff, like why wine is what it is and how it's transitioned, the history of France and England. You want to learn about beer? There's Morella Amato. She's a high-end Cicerone in Canada. She wrote a book called Beerology. These are fun books. They're not like encyclopedias. They're more stories. And I think once you start getting excited and you get that bug, then you can get deep into reading a technical paper. But the place to start is not reading a technical document. It's more researching, you got to learn about geography, you got to learn about other details. So niagarasommelier.com, that's my website. Look on there, it shows all the brands that I work with. Reach out, my phone number and email is available, and we'd love to connect. You can do even a Zoom call for tutoring or in person. We'd love to work with you. So
Well, I would bet also, just, to kind of expand on that a bit more, from a standpoint of really learning, become that connoisseur. I mean, you've got one side of it with all the history and the complexity of all the things that we've talked about, right? But the other side of that is where you're actually sampling. You're in there tasting, taking all that knowledge and then trying to identify, in that sip or in that, tasting of the wine.
for sure, for sure. You know, the story is what's in the glass, and then the other half the story is what went into it. So, meeting the growers, seeing the tractor work. I worked on a farm driving tractor and watering vines and pulling out the posts that are at the end of the vineyard. I've been around this stuff for 20 years until I did it physically and got dirt under my hands. I didn't realize how hard these guys are working. I went back to my employer that paid for my sommelier in 2008, and I did a full harvest with them at Trius Winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's right beside Gretzky's winery. And I was tipping 4-ton bins of grapes into the receiving hopper, and I was dragging pumps and hoses around and climbing up on catwalks and going inside tanks and barrels. And, it was really cool. It gave me a different appreciation. So for so long, I've been hung up on just swirling and all that stuff, but there's so much that goes into it. And the amount of work that goes into that one bottle of wine, dozens, if not hundreds of people have touched every input, the vineyard, the wine production. It's just outstanding. So
Wow, fantastic. Well, definitely you've given me completely new understanding and just appreciation, right? To all that goes into this. It's just not sitting down at a table and having a glass of wine. I mean, what you've described here and going into great detail and understand is truly fascinating, and really appreciate you coming on. Good luck with all the events coming up. I'd love to try to make one or multiple of those events and experience it firsthand. So awesome. Thank you so much for your time here today, and again, looking forward to hear how all these events have gone.
awesome, John. Well, have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey guys, if you really like this episode and you want to see similar, you're going to love this one right here. Just click the link.